Most movies fail in very predictable ways. They either look great but feel empty, or they have a strong message but forget to tell a coherent story, or they completely ignore internal logic and consistency within their own continuity. That's exactly why I was skeptical going into K-pop Demon Hunters. Based on the name alone, I did not expect a well-written film. A story about K-pop idols secretly moonlighting as demon hunters sounds like the kind of concept that would rely on style, hype, and spectacle, rather than structure and character. However, that is not the case at all. Despite its flaws, K-pop Demon Hunters works. And the reason it works is not primarily because of its visuals, its concept, or even its themes. It works because the story is built on solid foundations and the writing holds it together. Even if the movie had weaker visuals, or was entirely in black and white, it would still function as a good movie. Because at the end of the day, what carries it is not how it looks, but how it's written. The characters, their decisions, and the cause and effect structure of the plot are what drive everything forward. That's something a lot of movies get wrong. You can have the best visuals, the most interesting premise, and even a strong theme, but if the story itself is not coherent, if the characters are inconsistent, or if the world does not follow its own internal logic, the entire thing falls apart. Because every movie is a story. And that story has to be strong enough to survive critical analysis. K-pop Demon Hunter succeeds because, for the most part, it does exactly that. The strongest aspect of the movie is how clearly the story is driven by character decisions. The plot is not just a sequence of events happening randomly or in a contrived way. It unfolds because of what the characters choose to do, and more importantly, because of who they are and why they choose to do it. Rumi is the center of that structure. Her actions are not arbitrary, and they are not just there to move the plot forward. They make sense based on who she is and what her motives are. Rumi is part demon, and she hides that part of herself from everyone because she fears how others will react if they were to discover the truth. Because of that, she overcompensates. She puts up walls, isolates herself from the group, and begins to act emotionally and impulsively. She pushes the golden release because she wants to turn the whole moon golden as fast as possible, so that she no longer has to keep her secrets from her friends. She becomes obsessed with that goal because she feels that she cannot truly be herself until she is free of her patterns. Celine plays a key role in reinforcing this structure by encouraging Rumi to keep hiding her patterns, to only lower her guard once those patterns are gone. Celine reinforces Rumi's original belief system. That system is then gradually challenged throughout the movie. Rumi's perspective changes because she has genuine, vulnerable moments with Jinu. For the first time, she opens up to someone outside of Celine's influence. Also, Rumi's voice healing as a result of her opening up to Jinu is thematically strong, while not undermining the internal logic of the movie. Jinu, in turn, is not written as a purely evil villain. He functions more as a tragic downfall figure, closer to Darth Vader than to a one-dimensional antagonist. That allows him to have meaningful conversations with Rumi and develop a relationship with her, one that ultimately shifts both of their trajectories. Also, the demons themselves, being controlled by Kima, by using their shame and their pain, adds depth to the villain team that would otherwise just be bad guys who are in the way. That internal logic and continuity within the script are what make the movie significantly stronger. Because Rumi's decisions are believable, the consequences that follow feel earned. When tension builds up later in the story, it does not feel like the plot is forcing conflict. It feels like a natural outcome of everything that has already been established. This is where good writing becomes visible. The story follows a clear cause and effect chain. One decision leads to another, and those decisions create consequences that move the plot forward. Nothing feels disconnected, and nothing feels like it happens just because the script needs it to happen. And this applies not only to Rumi, but to the other characters as well. Mira and Zoe are not just background characters. They react to Rumi's behavior in ways that feel consistent. They do not blindly trust her when she gives them no reason to. They question her. They respond emotionally. and that reinforces the internal logic of the story. In a weaker script, those characters might ignore attention or act in whatever way is most convenient for the plot. Here, they act like real people would. That consistency is what makes the group dynamic feel real. The same applies to Genu. At first, his actions are selfish, but gradually he begins to believe that he too could perhaps be saved from the curse of his shame and his patterns. However, Genu only fully redeems himself at the end because he is unable to tell Rumi the truth about his past and because Kima tortures him. That's why Genu sabotages the Idol Awards show instead of going along with Rumi's plan. However, when he sees Rumi in mortal danger, he can't just stand by and watch. Not only because of his relationship with her, but also because of his shame of failing his family and already failing Rumi once. That pushes him to act, even at the cost of his own life. The story does not rely on sudden changes or unexplained shifts in behavior. It builds towards its outcomes. Rumi's decisions make sense with who she is, and her shifting character is justified by the events of the movie. It is not arbitrary or contrived. It is earned. Her transformation is not sudden. It's built up throughout multiple scenes, and that build-up makes the climax more impactful. When Rumi finally comes to terms with who she is and refuses to hide any longer, the moment carries real weight because the movie has done the work to earn it. Rumi choosing to push Celine away in the end is not just a dramatic beat. It is a payoff that makes sense with who she has become and how the events of the story have changed her inner world. She doesn't want to hide her true self anymore. It's not just about what happens, it's about whether it is justified. And in K-pop Demon Hunters, it mostly is. Another reason the movie works is that the characters are written as people, not archetypes. They are allowed to be awkward. They make mistakes. They sometimes act in ways that are awkward or even goofy. And that's exactly what makes them feel believable. Because consistency in character writing does not mean perfection. It means that behavior aligns with who the character is. The interactions feel natural. Conversations are not just there to deliver information, they reflect relationships. Tension builds because things are left unsaid, not because the script artificially creates conflict. That kind of writing is subtle, but essential. Without it, the emotional moments would feel dull. Now, that does not mean the movie is flawless. The ending, in particular, weakens the overall strength of the story. Some of the resolution feels rushed, and certain elements should have been developed more thoroughly. The payoff does not fully match the build-up in every aspect. But this is an important distinction. These are not structural failures. They are execution problems. The foundation of the story remains intact. The characters are still consistent. The logic of the plot is still there. The problems come from how quickly certain threads are resolved, not from a breakdown in the writing itself. And that's why the movie still works. Because even when it stumbles, it does not collapse. This ties into a broader point I have about storytelling. A movie does not need an extremely complex theme or a deep meta-narrative to be good. A movie can have a simple idea and still be effective, as long as the writing supports it. A weaker theme with good writing can result in a good movie, but a strong theme with bad writing will almost always produce an inferior one. Because if the story does not make sense, if the characters are inconsistent, or if the events do not follow logical progression, the audience will notice, and once that structure breaks, everything else loses impact. This is where many movies fall apart. They focus on presentation or on having a big idea, but they neglect the fundamentals. K-pop Demon Hunters does not. It builds its story on character decisions. It maintains internal logic. It allows consequences to follow naturally. And it keeps its characters consistent. Going back to my initial skepticism, I expected a movie that would rely on its concept to carry it. Something entertaining on the surface, but weak underneath. What I got instead was a movie that understands the fundamentals of storytelling. And that makes all the difference. If K-pop Demon Hunters ever becomes a book, I'll make sure not to judge it by its cover again. Because at the end of the day, visuals can enhance a movie, and themes can add meaning, but neither of those can replace solid writing or carry a movie on their own. If the story works, the movie works. And if the story does not work, nothing else can fully save it. K-pop Demon Hunter succeeds because its story, its characters, and its internal logic are strong enough to hold everything together and survive critical analysis. Its theme of facing shame and coming to terms with oneself is tied well into the story without overwhelming it. And the stylish animation and good songs elevate the movie from simply being well written to being genuinely solid on multiple levels. Even so, the writing is what carries it the most. Because without the writing, there is no movie. And that's what makes it a good one.